Yeah, very good morning to all the participants. First of all, I thank the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my views on the meaning, definition, and kinds of rights. Today, human rights is a very basic, essential element every one of us very often come across. So, we want to know the basic things about human rights now. First thing, let me start with the meaning of human rights. The rights are associated with human beings. The rights are born with human beings. That's where the rights of human beings and the rights of all other beings are different. Human beings possesses certain basic inalienable rights by virtue of human beings. These rights are essential for the protection and maintenance of individuals to live a dignified life and to the fullest development of a personality, without which a human being cannot develop, cannot increase his potentials. Only living being in the planet which has the possibility of infinite development is human beings. All other living beings have a limit in their development, in their mental caliber. But human beings' capacities to develop is infinite. The same planet, we have a Jesus, we have a Buddha, we have a normal human beings like you and me. We have a certain human beings as social evils. All are born in this planet Earth. But one has become a god. One has become a human being. One has become less than a human being. Why? This is where the human beings are different from other living beings. So, to the fullest possible development, some rights are essential. These rights are called human rights. This is called birthright. Irrespective of the caste, religion, sex, and nationality, every human being must possess these rights. Because of their immense significance, human beings, these rights are otherwise called sometimes fundamental rights, sometimes basic rights, sometimes inherent rights. But whatever the kinds of right it has been called for, but their basic quality, their basic character is the same and it remains the same. To know further about the rights, we just go back and see how the rights originated, how the rights have been evolved over the years. This is the origin of human rights. Once they have the freedom, once they enjoy the rights, there comes a civilization. One among them is Sumerian civilization. In the Sumerian civilization, one of the thinkers called Ur-Nammu. There was a number of different codes of law has been established in Sumeria. Sumerian civilization not only is well known for its kind of systematic life, but more than the organized life and the defining and writing its own code. They have framed their own codes of law. Among the codes of law, one of the code was called the Ur-Nammu code. In it, one of the rights mentioned is widows have the right to remarry. It was written in Sumerian language, but this language has been extinct now. It was not there. Next, we move on to the next thing. Hammurabi's code. Hammurabi also ruled in the Sumerian Euphrates Tigris area, but this time Hammurabi was a king, whereas the Ur-Nammu was a lawgiver. The lawgiver's law cannot be compulsive, cannot binding the king to implement. But Hammurabi was a king of Babylon. Babylon, most of us know of Hanging Gardens. It is famous for the Hanging Gardens, one of the ancient seven wonders of the world, where he was the sixth king of Babylon, and he was the first king to introduce certain rights to the people. So when we look at the origin of human rights with authority, with the legitimacy, we can find that origin in the Sumerian area, in the Sumerian civilization, in the Babylonian Empire, that is modern day Iran period. Then comes religion. Now, during the Ur-Nammu code, during the various civilizations, and during the Hammurabi's code, there was no question of religion. There was no religion at all. People were lived their life in a different way, just portraying and worshipping the nature. And whoever gives them the benefit, they simply thank and worship. That was the kind of life they lived. Now comes religion. Once religion comes, religion started advising us, educating us, making us to understand what are all the duties one has to perform. It was written. What is the duty of a child to the father? What is the duty of the parents to the children? What is the duty of a family head? What is the duty of the king? What is the duty of the saint? What is the duty of all these things? And what is the responsibilities? This has been defined specifically in the religion. So many religions we have, whether it is Islam, whether it is Christianity, whether it is Hinduism, whether it is Buddhism. All these religions teach one basic thing, that is the basic duties to be a responsible, good, and honest citizen. This is the one thing. This is the basic teaching of every other religion. Next comes in India, one big empire. This Mauryan Empire was the second empire actually. Historians may know that. First one was the Magadha. Then comes Mauryan. In the annals of history, this is the second largest empire in the Indian subcontinent. But this empire, we always specifically mention, though so many emperors ruled India, those so many kings invaded India, looted India, ruled India, to migrated and administered India. But one empire, that is Mauryan Empire, we always mention whenever we discuss about human rights. It was during the Mauryan Empire, the principle of ahimsa, non-violence, and some of the civil rights, very particularly some of the major civil and political rights were guaranteed to the citizens of the Mauryan Empire. This was the major breakthrough in the history of human rights. You understand the period. Mauryan Empire was in the 3rd century BC. During the 3rd century BC, what is the status of the developed countries today? Say, for example, we have the European countries, United States of America. These are all the developed countries today. What about the status of the people in the 3rd century BC? When the Mauryan Empire guaranteeing civil rights and political rights to the citizens of the Indian subcontinent, people in the United States, people in Europe were wearing the leaves as dresses and hunting in the forest, that kind of a thing. So this Ashokan Empire is more importantly called Mauryan Empire, has given unprecedented civil and political rights. That is the reason why Ashoka is always called Ashoka the Great. And as soon as we got independence, we remember the contribution to the welfare state by the Ashoka. Remembering Ashoka, we have put this Ashoka wheel in our national flag. That there comes the greatness of the Mauryan Empire. But the modern day human rights are not originated from Ur-Nammu's code or any other codes, but we have some legal documents in 1215 Magna Carta and Glorious Revolution 1688, English Bill of Rights 1689, Virginia Declaration of Rights, US Bill of Rights, French Revolution, Russian Revolution. These are all the various international events that have contributed to the growth of human rights. Each and every revolution, each and every event, phenomena contributes certain things to the development of to the growth of human rights. Then comes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As everyone of you know that after the Second World War in 1945, the United Nations was organized, established. After 3 years of its establishment in 1948, December 10, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights was established. This Universal Declaration of Human Rights was so much different from other covenants, other conventions, because this is the first time a declaration having the scope of, having the jurisdiction of complete globe. They have the French Revolution, they have the Russian Revolution, they have the English Bill of Rights, they have the Virginia Declaration of Rights. But those rights are having the jurisdiction of only those areas, only particular that region. But this one has been instrumental and has the global aspect. This global expression is the first in its kind, unique in its kind. And that is the reason why every year, this December 10 has been celebrated worldwide as International Human Rights Day. So this UDHR has some basic 30 articles dealing with the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. It is the foundation of two binding human rights law later. Those are called International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. These three documents collectively together be called as International Bill of Human Rights. This has been there. But more importantly, these covenants and declarations are dealing with very basic rights. One thing you must understand, you must remember that these are all international expressions, first of all, first time. But at the same time, we must realize that, we must understand that these are all not combined entities. It is not a binding convention. Most of the countries have joined the UDHR. Once they have joined the UDHR, once they have accepted and ratified the international covenants, what they have to do is, those countries, according to their own conditions, they have to frame certain rules, certain rights and regulations according to, in accordance with these UDHR. How much the countries making this accordance is depending upon the countries, their own culture, private, and so many things. Next thing, we have a government committee themselves into it. We have the principle of human rights. These human rights have major three pillars. The principle of universal inherence. Every human being has certain rights capable of enumerated and defined, which are not conferred on him by any ruler, not yet, inherent in him by virtue of his humanity alone. Better, please be alert. Please resume again. Dear participants, this is going to be end in 1 minute, no problem. After the 1 minute, all the participants are requested to rejoin with the same login, user ID, and the password. So I just keep on continuing with the lecture. And if the connection is terminated, no problem. You can rejoin it with the next 2 minutes with the same user ID and basic rights: right to life, right to liberty, right to property. And he says that these three rights are not only natural rights. These three rights are not only human rights, it is natural rights. So today we have the rights. In our Constitution of India, we have certain rights are fundamental rights. Like India, every citizens of the different countries, they have their own rights guaranteed in their own constitution and given by the constitution. So if your right is given by the Constitution, the same Constitution has given the access to confiscate those rights also. So the fundamental rights are given, not born along with us. So the rights guaranteed by the Constitution can be taken away by the same Constitution at one point of time. It is there, applicable to everywhere. But Locke says differently, rights are natural rights. That means it is naturally when you are born with you, some rights are born. What are they? Three rights: right to life, liberty, and property. So it is inherent, it has universal character according to John Locke. Then the principle of inalienability. No human being can be deprived of any of those rights by the acts of any ruler, by the will of the majority of the sovereign people. So the rights is the basic principle is it cannot be taken away. It should not be taken away. That means it is natural. By any other reason, it cannot be taken away. It cannot be surrendered and solved. It is with you always. Once you die, it also goes away. So the rights are born with you and this dies with you. Then there is no question of authority. There is no question of legitimacy. There is no question of guarantees. It is there with you. It is the state to protect that rights. There we can find the difference of John Locke's view of rights and the present day fundamental rights. The present day fundamental rights, present day human rights which we enjoy are guaranteed and protected by the respective constitutions. But whereas the original principle of human rights is not like that. It is born with you, dies with you. But state has to protect those rights which are born with you until you die. So there comes the difference. There comes the next principle is the rule of law. Where rights conflict with each other, the conflicts must be resolved by the consistent, independent, and impartial application of just laws in accordance with the just procedures. The rule of law is essential to maintain the balance between the rights. Because if one wants to exercise a particular right, for example, freedom of expression, to what extent he can exercise this freedom of expression? This freedom of expression one can enjoy until this freedom of expression should not be a hindrance to the other person to enjoy his basic rights. So there must be a balance between the enjoyment of rights. For that matter, we need a complete rule of law. These are all the basic three principles, underlying principles. And on these principles only, the entire human rights have been built upon. We have the human rights and the state. This is the next thing. Where we can enjoy human rights. Now where we are enjoying the human rights. Today in India, we are enjoying the human rights as Indians. The Indian Constitution guaranteed its citizens some rights. So from this we understand we need an organized community, an organized state, only where we can enjoy human rights. Post-colonial period, this has become the norms of law. In the 19th century, even 18th century, 10th century, even before those centuries, whether the state was there, yes, state was there. Whether the organized community was there, yes, organized community was there. But those organized community, the structure, that execution, that administrative structure worked for the welfare of certain individuals, not for the entire people of the country. So that was the thing. So this has been the major role of a state in the 20th century. That is why often the thinkers compare the state in the 20th century, the state in the previous centuries. There is a huge difference of the goal of the state, the means of the state, the ends of the state in the 20th century, and while we compare from other centuries also. As I told you, it is there for all-round development of a personality. Again, all-round development of personality is possible only in a state of law. As long as we live in a state, we can enjoy human rights. More importantly, depending upon the state's character. Though we live as a human being universally, but how much rights we enjoy depends upon where we live. The rights we enjoy in India are different from the rights enjoyed by the United States. Again, that is different from the rights enjoyed by the citizens of an Arab country. Again, the rights enjoyed by the country in a poverty-ridden country in Africa. So, the rights enjoyed by the citizens of the country depends upon the character of the state in which that human being lives. So this one difference we can find in the post-democratic setup. In the pre-democratic setup, it was universal but cannot be enjoyed. In the post-democratic setup, the rights are though universal, but enjoyment of rights are depending upon the nature of the state. Then comes one important thing is human dignity. So human rights are the very essence of a meaningful life and maintain human dignity. It is the utmost purpose of the government. One important right the human being has, only human being, that is right to dignified living, not just living. The state exists not for the sake of life only, for the sake of good life with a good dignity. Next, we move to the another area of the lecture, that is kinds of human rights. Though several kinds are there, two major kinds we can say it. One is civil and political rights, and second one is economic, social, and cultural rights. These civil and political rights is the protection of life, right to life, right to personal liberty, essential for dignified life. Again, these civil and political rights very particularly emphasize dignified life. Man needs dignity. Man needs social esteem. Man is a social animal, not just an animal, not just a social animal. He needs just a status, a social status in the society, dignity. Today, most of us come across the reports of honor killings in the magazines, papers, and all. What is it? A parent or a brother killing a girl, killing a woman for the sake of protecting or safeguarding the honor of his family. That means what? That dignity, they feel their dignity is affected. They have the money, they have a good life, they have a power, everything they have. But when it comes to dignity, that particular right is being affected. So they can go to any extreme, even to kill their own boss. So this one of the basic rights, these civil and political rights deal with. Then these civil and political rights are interrelated. Both are interrelated, and therefore it does not appear logical to differentiate them. Then economic, social, and cultural rights. This is based on the concept of social equality. We all know what is social equality, especially in the Indian social setup. In the Indian social setup, the enjoyment of rights all depending upon what kind of social status you enjoy in the society, in the social strata where you are. If you are at the lowest strata, lowest hierarchy, then the enjoyment of your right is limited. So this they have a very vast experience in the Indian setup. So this is based upon the concept of social equality. This we have the right to adequate food, clothing, housing, standard of living, freedom from hunger, right to social security, right to physical, mental health, right to education. All these things we can find under the kinds of economic, social, and cultural rights. The enjoyment of these rights require a major commitment of resources. That's more important thing. Every country in the world, most of them have signed and ratified the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. But all those countries which have ratified the covenants, whether the people of those countries are enjoying the same amount of rights enjoyed by a well-developed country? No. One important thing is the commitment of resources. If a country has major resources, economically powerful, then the people of the country can enjoy more rights. Then these two covenants are recognized by United Nations, and again, a close relationship between these two covenants. On the one hand, they have said there is a relationship between civil and political rights. On the other hand, they have the relationship between cultural, social, and economic rights. All these five rights clubbed together to be one major rights. Next, we move on to the final area, generations of rights. We have a different generations of rights. The first we see the first generation of rights. These rights are acquired by the people through force. From the 12th century, from the 13th century, 14th century, 15th century, in various centuries, when authority was in the hands of the few people, not with the people. So the idea of state was at the nascent stage, is at the very early stage. People do not know what the state is, right? This is the stage where people started demanding the rights, and finally, by force, they have acquired certain things. Magna Carta, or Petition of Rights, or Bill of Rights, French Declaration of Human and Citizens' Rights. One uniform phenomena we can find with all these documents. These all documents are born out of force, by the sheer force of the people. By the sheer force of the people, there was a revolution. Out of the revolution, some rights were born. So, first generations of rights were born, were acquired through force. So that is why these documents very basically emphasizing some of the basic things, safeguarding against the taxation of the king, safeguarding against the arrest of persons, and ensures the freedom of speech, freedom of thought, right to petition, and very importantly, liberty and equality. These are all the things denied by the kings to the people. So by force, they have acquired these rights. These rights are called first generation of rights. These rights are very basic rights, be with the right to life, freedom and security of person, right to property, freedom of mind, freedom of expression, freedom of free elections. Again, we can see that all these are very basic rights. But these basic rights are acquired through force. These are called first generation of rights. Next, we come to the second generation of rights. This second generation of rights is different from first generation of rights. Here we can find the right to work, freedom of association, right to education, all these things are. Here we can find the emphasis is on social rights. Against the basic first generation of rights, it requires institutional support from the state. The state must intervene through legislation. The earlier rights people can enjoy, but the second generation of rights, we need the support from the institution. For example, the state. Only state has to do something officially, legally, to make its citizens to enjoy these rights. These rights are second generation of rights. Here we can find the first generation of rights concentrates on free status. First of all, human being wanted that free status. Now it concentrates on the social status. Now comes the third generation of rights. This is called solidarity rights, which cannot be accepted only by an individual. It can be implemented by the individuals, not individuals, as a society collectively. So some rights we can enjoy collectively. This is the most important thing. This is where the third generation of rights are different from the first and the second generation of rights. These rights are not given to one individual. These rights are guaranteed to citizens as a whole. They can find rights of people to self-determination, right to peace, right to development, right to humanitarian assistance, right to clean environment. All these things are right of a society, right of a group of people, right of the country as a whole. So these rights can be enjoyed if the group, if the society is responsible. If the society is more responsible, the enjoyment of these rights will be more because it has related with every one of these. They have the right of minorities, religious, linguistics, etc. These rights require not only the need to create an institutional support by the state, but require a limitation of rights of the first generation rights. For example, right to clean environment. To enjoy the society, to enjoy the right to clean environment, certain basic rights of the first generation of rights are to be restricted. The first generation of rights to be restricted only on the limitation of first generation of rights. We can enjoy the third generation of rights. See, this is the thing. Now we come the fourth generation of rights. This is called the rights of future generations as well as. This means these rights not belong to one individual or social group. It belong to only the humanity as a whole. For example, exploitation and exploration of cosmic space. Then to recent days, we can see the development of genetic engineering. So we have, most of us know that the banning of cloning. So we have the right of genetics. We have our traditional setup. We are rich in culture, tradition. This has to be protected. And exploration of space, genetic engineering. So these rights are called future rights, and these rights are called rights of future generations, humanity as a whole, without having any barriers in the country as a whole. These four are called four generational rights. But again, one point which I want to emphasize here is, though we have kinds of rights, though we have covenants, though we have universal declarations, though we have constitutions, but the enjoyment of these rights, again, depends upon the kind of state in which we live. The responsibility in which we have in us make others to enjoy those rights. So with these few words, I just thank the authorities for giving me a wonderful opportunity to share my views on the very basic things, meaning definition and kinds of rights. And I think most of you have got some idea about the basic ideas of rights and definitions. Now, the session is open for discussion, and those participants, if they have any doubt, they can just click the hand image in your screen, so that those participants' microphone will be unmuted, and you can ask me the doubts. Thank you. Thank you, Anand. Now the participants can ask. Please unmute Neela Begum.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir.